So as you can see, I think in its simplest form, the flipped classroom can pretty much be summed up by what used to be done at home is now done in class, and what used to be done in class is now done at home. Now, it's a lot bigger than that, but that is probably in the least terms what the flipped classroom is. Now, one thing about the flipped classroom is this idea is really not anything new. I mean, this has been happening for hundreds of years. Students do work at home, like read a book or do some research, and then come to class and they talk about it and they learn about it and they apply it. So all we've done is we've taken a piece of technology and we've leveraged it where students watch the video at home and they come to class to talk about and discuss what they learned at home.
And really what happens is it changes the dynamic of the schoolroom. Now the teacher is now interacting with kids. We really believe that we talk to every kid in every class every day because you're walking around helping kids because you've taken a lecture out of the class. What can you do in class is, next slide, is that you can, the kids can do more hands-on problem-based type learning activities. In our case, we were science teachers, so that was pretty powerful. Also, one thing that's really amazing is that the person who needs the most help, this is a picture of Matt. Matt's a kid who struggled a lot with our course, chemistry, and so he got the attention he needed because he struggled a lot with the content. Now, this really freed us up for a lot of time. That's been something that's been very valuable. So if you look at this chart here, in the first two columns, that was the traditional class. In traditional class, we had a 90-minute block if you kind of add up the minutes there. We do a warm-up activity for 5 minutes, previous night's homework's 20 minutes, lecture content 30 to 45, and then guided independent lab 20 35. But if you look in the right column, in the flipped class, we're able to recover valuable class time. Just notice the time breakdown. You still have that 10 minutes to just answer questions from the videos, but you've got this huge block of time. It was very, very powerful. Now, as we wrote the book, as they talked about earlier, we discovered that there's like three key elements to making a flipped class work. Having these instructional videos, which everyone kind of focuses on, but it's really not the key. But also you can have engaging class activities. That was really key for us to kind of reinvent our classroom with better activities. And then we really had to rethink how we assessed students, and we'll talk some more about that later. So what did we do with all this extra time? Now that we had all this extra time, well, we actually decided after our first year of flipping our classroom that there was a better way than flipping. So we invented a new version of flipped classroom and called it the flipped mastery model. Now, in the mastery model, I don't know if you've probably done any research on mastery learning, but mastery learning was popularized by Benjamin Bloom, Bloom's taxonomy guy. And Benjamin Bloom, he had some problems. He had great research that showed that the mastery model worked in the 70s and 80s. The problem was it was just not logistically very easy to operate. Two huge things that teachers complained about was when do you deliver the lectures? How do you deliver the lectures? And, of course, in the 70s and 80s, there was no Internet, there was no YouTube. And so now that we can make these videos, that kind of solved that problem. The other problem he had was how do you do all this assessment? The assessment was really huge. And with technology, we figured out a way to do assessment so you don't have like 50,000 versions of the same test sitting on your cupboards. So
the assessment piece has really been one of the transformative processes we've gone through. So we do, most of my day is spent doing formative assessment with students, checking their understanding, redirecting them when they get off track, redirecting them when they have misconceptions. And then the students, wrong direction. Then the students spend much of their time just giving me feedback. And then they'll perform a summative assessment when they're done with the unit, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit as well. So what are some of the results that we're seeing from our students from this?
So what we found is that the students become independent learners. We don't have a lot of time, but I could tell you story after story about students who became independent learners. They're not so dependent upon the teacher. So I think that's very powerful. You know, I have not been a very good differentiator as a teacher before we discovered the flipped model. And so I can differentiate for each kid. Since I talk to every kid in every class every day, I can actually individualize the education for each student and differentiate very well. This really fits with RTI and so many other things that we do and want to do in schools these days.
So we're science teachers after all, and a lot of teachers who also teach science ask us about, well, what about inquiry and what about project-based learning and things like that? And that just doesn't apply just to science. Applies to other courses as well, but we get asked that a lot. Now, to be clear, we do believe in inquiry, and we do believe in doing projects. We don't think that everything should be taught with a lecture, be that video or live, but then again, I don't think everything can be taught using an inquiry activity either. So what we've done is we've tried to incorporate elements of the flipped classroom, elements of inquiry, elements of project-based learning, and we're doing that in order to take Bloom's taxonomy, which typically looks like this, and try to invert the shape of it a little bit. You know, our videos really cover a lot of the remembering and understanding and maybe a little bit of the applying, but we really want students analyzing and creating when they're in the classroom. So we hope to remove these lower levels of Bloom from the class time and be able to utilize class time for the higher levels of Bloom, and I think that's one of the great things that the flipped classroom does. So what that's really led us to do is to move towards inquiry-based learning, and we've incorporated elements of standards-based grading as well in our classroom. In addition to that, this past school year, we've been trying to incorporate elements of UDL, which is Universal Design for Learning. If you're not familiar with Universal Design for Learning, it basically is just trying to provide access for everyone into the classroom. So if you design for the fringe, you design for the top and the bottom of the class, then everybody benefits. Instead of shooting for the middle and hoping you get most of the students, you shoot for the fringes, and in doing so, you'll catch all of the students and meet all of their learning needs. So in doing that, what we've been able to do is to provide options for the students. Part of the elements of Universal Design for Learning is giving students options in the way they learn material and also in the way that they demonstrate their understanding of something. So my videos are no longer required in my class. They are options. They are available for the students to learn. Now, some students, they might learn the learning objectives that I have established for my class through my video. They might read the textbook. They might research that objective online. And I, as a teacher, then help them learn how to filter that information instead of just being the one giving them the information. So one of the other elements is the students being able to demonstrate their understanding in a way that's meaningful to them. Now, I mentioned those summative assessments earlier, and typically we use Moodle, which is our learning management system in our classroom, and students can take the tests on there. John mentioned Benjamin Bloom's research and how they had to come up with so many versions of the test. We just let the computer do that now. But some students do not test well, but I know that they understand it, so I give them options. This year alone, I've had students design video games, write comic books, write out in prose everything that they know about the particular learning objectives. I have students using Prezi. I have students building things. So the sky's the limit for them. So one other thing I decided to do on a whim is I wanted feedback on what on my tests were kind of worthless, given this age that we live in, where we have lots and lots of resources like the internet. So I said, you know what? All my tests are open internet. You can use whatever resource you want to solve my problems, to answer my questions. And so what I'm trying to get from that is feedback on what is really not that important in my curriculum that I could probably remove if the kid can just, search it and get the answer in 5 seconds. So John's going to tell you now what the flipped class is and is not.
Yeah, so what we think it is that we think the flipped class is a piece of the puzzle. It's not the answer to all of education, but it's a piece of the puzzle. It's also a great stepping stone to what it's not. It's also not magic, and it's also not an excuse for a lazy teachers to sit around. We've heard of teachers who have used our videos and used them inappropriately and just made it an easy class. Next slide there. Yeah, it's a piece of the puzzle I mentioned earlier, and it's a stepping stone. If you have a teacher who's been a lecturer for 20 years and you want them to sort of think differently and do some of these things Aaron talked about, universal UDL and project-based learning, then I think that this is a great stepping stone. A great quote from a colleague of ours in Michigan. He said, "We don't use tool for the sake of using tools. We use the tool when it's appropriate for the job at hand." And another colleague said, "Pedagogy must drive technology. Technology must not drive pedagogy."
All right, well, that's pretty much it for our presentation. At this point, we're going to turn you over to Troy and to Rob, and they're going to share with you their experience in applying some of these concepts in their classroom.